Human left his leftovers for stray animals, but turned around to find 3 hungry alien girls. The rain drummed against the window pane of Marcus Chen's apartment as he stood at his kitchen counter, surveying the remnants of last night's dinner. A half-full container of beef stir-fry, some rice, and noodles he'd picked at without much enthusiasm. Normally, he would have let it spoil in the back of his refrigerator, but something in him rebelled against the waste today. The news had been running stories about the colony of feral dogs near the old Riverside warehouse district, and he'd been thinking about them all morning. Marcus had always been the type to notice things others overlooked. A stray cat that wandered his apartment complex. Birds that nested on his fire escape. Small creatures struggling to survive in the margins of human civilization. He packed the leftovers into a biodegradable container, grabbed his jacket, and headed out into the drizzling afternoon. The warehouse district was exactly as gray and desolate as he'd imagined. Crumbling brick structures rose against the overcast sky like the ribs of some ancient, sleeping beast. The feeding station he'd heard about was tucked behind the easternmost building, a sheltered spot where someone, a kind soul like himself, had been leaving food for the strays. A yellow robot stood sentinel nearby, its construction site markings faded with time, towering silently over the scene. Marcus set down his container, arranging it carefully beside the existing bowls. The rain pattered softly, and for a moment, the world felt very small and very quiet. He stood for a few seconds, watching the empty concrete, wondering if the dogs would eat well today. Then he turned to leave. He hadn't made it more than 10 steps when he heard something that stopped him cold. "Excuse me?" The voice was small, uncertain, and distinctly not canine. Marcus turned slowly, his heart already accelerating. Standing where his leftovers had been worth 3 figures he couldn't quite process at first. They were small, maybe 4 feet tall, with pale, white hair that caught the gray light like snow. Their skin was a deep, otherworldly blue, almost the color of twilight. They wore simple, oversized sweaters that hung off their slender frames. But their eyes, large, dark, and unmistakably intelligent, fixed on him with a mixture of apprehension and hope. Did you leave this food?" the middle one asked. She was the bravest, Marcus realized. Her friends stood slightly behind her, their hands clasped together nervously. Marcus's mind scrambled for logic, for explanations, for anything that made sense. This was impossible. This was... "Are you going to call them?" the girl on the left asked suddenly, fear flickering across her delicate features. "The authorities? The hunters?" "Hunters?" Marcus managed to say. "We landed 3 weeks ago," the brave one explained quickly, as though she'd practiced this speech. "Our ship was damaged. We came down in the industrial sector. We've been hiding, trying to survive, but the food we brought is almost gone, and we can't risk going into the populated areas. We've been following you. You've been kind to the animals. We thought perhaps..." She trailed off, her large eyes growing even larger and more vulnerable. The girl on the right spoke up in a whisper. "We're not dangerous. We promise." Marcus found himself kneeling down, despite every rational instinct screaming that this was madness. But madness or not, they were clearly starving. He could see the faint hollowness of their cheeks, the way their hands trembled slightly as they reached for the containers. "What are your names?" he asked. The brave one looked at her friends, then back at Marcus. "I'm Lyra. This is Asha." She gestured to the girl on the left. "And this is Kay." The smallest of the 3 gave a small, hesitant wave. For the next hour, Marcus did something he'd never imagined doing. He sat in a warehouse district during a rainstorm and heard the story of 3 alien girls stranded on Earth. They told him about their exploration mission, how a solar flare had damaged their ship's navigation and propulsion systems, how they'd crash-landed and spent weeks hiding in the industrial areas where scanners were less likely to detect them. They told him about their families, about the world they came from, about how terrified they were of being discovered by humans who might see them as threats rather than refugees. As Lyra spoke, Marcus realized something profound was shifting in him. These were children, there was no other word for it. Frightened, hungry children far from home, hiding in the margins of a world that would probably fear them if given the chance. They weren't invaders or threats. They were just 3 girls trying to survive. "I can help you," he heard himself say. "You can." Asha's voice was barely above a whisper. "There's an old warehouse on my street. It's been condemned for years. No one goes there. I can bring you supplies. Proper supplies. Blankets, medicine, whatever you need." Marcus spoke quickly, his mind already formulating plans. "But we have to be careful. We can't let anyone know." Over the following weeks, Marcus became something between a caretaker and a friend to the 3 aliens. He brought them supplies, gradually helping them move to the safer location closer to his own neighborhood. He taught them about Earth, about human culture, about the best ways to avoid detection. In turn, they shared their knowledge, their perspective, their quiet wisdom. He learned that Lyra was the eldest and de facto leader. Asha had a talent for fixing things. She'd been working on their ship's communication system and had nearly gotten it operational. Kay was the sensitive one, the artist, who'd covered their walls with drawings of home. But it was a fragile existence, and Marcus knew it couldn't last forever. Eventually, they received contact from their mothership. There was a retrieval mission being planned. In 2 weeks, they would be able to go home. The night before their departure, the 4 of them sat together in the warehouse, and nobody spoke for a long time. "Thank you," Lyra finally said, "for seeing us as people, for helping us survive, for being kind." Marcus felt tears forming. "Thank you for reminding me why kindness matters, for showing me that compassion isn't foolish, it's the most important thing we have." The next morning, at dawn, a shimmering light descended through the clouds. Marcus watched from a distance as his 3 friends ascended into the sky, their silhouettes growing smaller against the brightness. But just before the light consumed them entirely, he saw them turn and wave. One last goodbye. Marcus never told anyone what had happened. He returned to his normal life, but he was no longer the same person. Every stray animal he encountered seemed to carry the memory of those 3 blue-skinned girls who taught him that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than he'd ever imagined. And somewhere, on a world beyond the stars, he liked to think, 3 girls would grow up knowing that when they needed help most, a human had offered it freely. Some acts of kindness ripple across galaxies.